So I'll hand over now to Rob Singleton from DfT, who will be leading the demo today. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Gary. So hi, I'm Rob Singleton. I'm the Head of Planning at the Department for Transport. I'm here to talk to you about the government's connectivity tool. It's the government, it's not just DfTs now. It's jointly badged by MHCLG and Active Travel England as well. And what I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of why we've done what we've done, what we think it should be potentially used for, but equally do a bit of a demo of the tool to sort of give you a sense of how it could be used in real-world applications. So without further ado, I'll crack on. So before I sort of get into the tool itself, I think it's probably worth saying what my team does at the Department for Transport and why the connectivity tool sort of came into being for a wider sort of team objective perspective. I'm the head of planning and Department for Transport. I'm also the head of the spatial and transport planning professions at the department. And we have been set up and been in place now for probably about 7 years to better align the spatial and transport planning systems, because I think it's pretty evident, and I think research points to the fact that often they're philosophically and sometimes structurally separate and don't work to complement or facilitate each other, which is the way it should work, because transport outcomes are linked intrinsically to spatial choices, and spatial outcomes are intrinsically linked to transport choices. So if you put something in the middle of nowhere, people are going to drive. If you put it somewhere that's more connected, they might not. So we do 3 principal functions at the Department for Transport. One is that we're a centre of excellence. So we provide a planning advisory service, for want of a better phrase, to all of our modal teams. So we work across all modes, across all policy areas, and across our arm's length bodies, as well as maintaining our principal relationship with the Ministry for Housing and the rest of Whitehall on planning matters, so that we can provide expert advice and secure better outcomes for the department and the communities we serve. We look to decarbonise transport network more generally to deliver modal shift, provide genuine choice in how people move, but also reduce things like transport and health inequalities. And in doing so, we've adopted a couple of key policy directions that are now being sort of brought through in national planning policy, one being vision-led transport planning and the second being the connectivity tool. So we innovate and we seek to address the climate emergency as much as other government missions, but also we're really sort of designed to sort of stand up to deliver sustainable patterns of development that are truly infrastructure-led. So change the narrative, change the dialogue, and see transport as the facilitator of growth. Equally, we work hand in glove with our sort of sister team, which is the housing and growth team, who are very run seal. They do what it says on the tin. They look at how transport can facilitate growth. So they are responsible for helping set up things like Platform 4, for example, which is an organisation that's going to be tasked with disposing of surplus rail land to deliver up to 40,000 homes, but also how they integrate transport in wider Whitehall conversations about things like new towns, and how we ensure that transport is at the centre of those conversations. And that's very much supported by a Secretary of State who sees transport infrastructure as absolutely essential in achieving the growth missions. Our other sister team is our data science team. Data science, they're the clever ones. They're the ones that actually done the tool. I'm just, I suppose, the salesman. Is that the right thing? I don't know. I'm a policy person. So let's see. I'm also a town planner and a transport planner but I'm also a civil servant, I suppose, but they do a range of things, connectivity being one of them, but we've been very lucky in the department to be able to develop this tool pretty much 100% in-house. And as I alluded to, this is all with the objective to drive in the government's missions and realising them. And one of those principal missions is delivering more housing up and down the country in more sustainable locations and at higher levels. But we think that the government's growth mission can only be achieved if we better align the spatial and transport planning systems, which comes to that first point of principle for the reason my team exists in. And to do that takes a range of different actors across a range of different disciplines and across a range of different organisations. We can't do this in isolation, we must do this collectively. So what we try to do is lead the debate on how we can get our key stakeholders, our key actors to better integrate their thinking more strategically. And transport driving growth for us really means is considering how transport is planned for, how it is delivered to support sustainable growth and drive a more sustainable use of our built environment. So that really means planning for new development around existing transport hubs, areas with good connectivity or areas that can be made more connected by targeted interventions. That all development should be easily and safely accessible and navigatable by foot and cycle, making sure that we're putting people first in our decisions, but also delivering transport infrastructure in the right place at the right time to unlock development in a way that we probably haven't previously. And what we're really trying to do is sort of avoid patterns of development that look like this, which is about geographically remote development, where car dependency is built in from day one, which doesn't put people first. It's built quite low density compared to our European counterparts. But also because you are putting things in geographically remote locations, it means it's more difficult to access key services and destinations, which again limits people's choice in the way they travel. And what that really means is we make quite an inefficient use of land. We do put things in more geographically remote locations because land happens to be available there, but that has a consequence to our communities in terms of health outcomes, economic outcomes, transport outcomes, but also people's reasonable ability to access the key services and destinations that they need to. So we want to move away from that to something that's a little bit more like this. Now, this isn't the only thing you could deliver with a transport focused view of development, but building at higher densities around transport is really critical in trying to achieve the government's ambitions for house building and job generation. So the connectivity tool is basically rising to the challenge of the UK growth mission. So at DfT, we're a very forward-leaning department. We asked ourselves a question about how we can tackle the challenge of the growth mission. How can we build the homes we need, maximise the development potentials of the site, and plan for and provide the infrastructure and services needed to support sustainable growth. So that means how do we improve connectivity to underserved communities as well as new communities and improve social, economic and environmental outcomes for those communities? But also how do we raise the bar on the expectations we set for both local authorities, developers and infrastructure providers to exponentially drive and deliver more homes up and down the country? And the answer to that for us was that we needed a commonly agreed definition of what sustainable location is to empower policymakers and decision takers to do things differently and better, that we needed to articulate this in a data-led way and create an unambiguous metric that enabled people to understand what a well-connected area or a sustainable location was, and that metric was embedded in national policy and routinely and consistently applied, effectively creating a level playing field. And for that, we believed that we needed to understand the relative connectivity of places. So what is connectivity? Well, it's a metric that measures people's ability to get where they want to go, the ability of the transport network to take you from an origin point to a destination of your choice. It accounts for different destinations, so it spatially maps different destinations. So places to go shopping, people visiting friends and family, going to work, getting schooled, going to the cinema or for education and recreational purposes, but also visiting a doctor and other healthcare facilities. It takes account of different modes of transport, prioritising sustainable transport modes as the key focus of the tool, which is about how you can get to these destinations by public transport, cycling or walking, but also how long it takes you to get to these destinations, capped off at about an hour, not about, exactly an hour. It's an index measure, so it shows the relative connectivity of places, so the hots and not spots. I always say the identification of not spots is as valuable as hotspots. So the deficiencies in the network for a plan making and decision taking point of view is as valuable as identifying where the efficiencies of the network lay, because you can plan around those different binary outcomes or binary contexts. It expresses this as a heat map, so it's a spatial tool. And it generates a connectivity score accounting for every 100 by 100 meters square in England and Wales. And in doing so, it does about 20 trillion calculations in the process. That all of this data goes into a very clever algorithm, which again, can't take any credit for. It was a data science team that done that. And what it does is it churns out a number between 0 and 100, indicating how well connected a particular location is. 100 being the most connected, 0 being the least connected. And that is there to sort of provide that unambiguous baseline metric to effectively establish where relative hotspots and not spots are in your geography. It has two principal functions. It has an analytical function, so you can actually draw a lot of data out of this. So it combines land use and transport data in a way that hasn't been done before, and it visually and spatially expresses that as a relative connectivity of any given geography. In this screenshot, you can see Nottingham, centre of Nottingham, unsurprisingly, looks quite hot, quite red, so it's very much a hot spot. But as you get to the hinterlands, the suburbs of Nottingham, and into the more rural communities, you can see that that colour cools off. So it shows spatially how connectivity can be expressed. But it also allows users to view the overall connectivity score, which is that single point of truth, your ability to get to any destination that you would need or want to get to by sustainable transport modes. But it also enables you to break that down by mode, destination, and any combination of these. So, for example, if all you care about is how connected a particular origin square is to education, you can just ask the tool to just select education. That map will change, that number will change, and it will give you the relative connectivity of that origin spot to education facilities. But if you care about how little kids with their little legs get to school by walking, you can turn on education, turn on the mode of transport, which is walking. And again, that map will change, that number will change, and it will give you that relative connectivity to education by walking from that origin destination. It also allows users to view the routes and destinations that contribute most to the score. So again, what are those routes that enable people to get to the key destinations quickly and efficiently? And again, you can print reports on all of this because that's important in terms of things like evidence base and the ability to for you to sort of dissect the data as far as you need and want. But you can also generate a relative score at local authority level, which shows a more granular sense of different connectivity across the local authority area. So what that really means is Nottingham does look quite red, and that's obvious because Nottingham City Centre, you've got lots of destinations, you've got lots of public transport, walking and cycling routes. But how useful is that in terms of what decisions you might want to make about what transport interventions to plan for, or where you might want to put higher levels of development? So if you turn on the local authority view, what it does is it shows you a relative readout of that redness. So if the redness, everything is about 80 or so, the local authority score will then disaggregate that into relative bandings. So you can see the hot spots and not spots within that red area. So again, gives you that next level of granularity. It also has a propositional function. Now, this is about enabling end users to plan for new public transport routes, multiple public transport routes and understand the impact of those public transport routes on relative connectivity for a given impact area. That's useful in terms of planning for A, reconnecting underserved communities, but also B, if you're looking to put new development in a particular geography where land is available, but you need to plan for the transport interventions needed to support it, this will enable you to do that, and it will give you a sense of what the impact of the connectivity score would be. One thing just to caveat on that is that this isn't a transport model, this is an indication of what would happen if you planned for these different transport modes. We are looking to broaden that to include propositional function for new land uses. So what happens if I stick a new school there, and active travel interventions, which is particularly pertinent where you have, say, an arterial road or a motorway that severs two communities, where if you put a bridge over it, you might improve connectivity exponentially for a geographically remote site. Why is it useful? Well, we think it could be transformational in maximising development, raising the bar on development expectations everywhere, up and down the country in rural and urban contexts, which will drive up housing and job densities, optimise the use of sites, kickstart economic growth, and ultimately deliver more housing for our communities. There is proof of concept. A metric-based approach was adopted in London back in 2004 when the then Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, developed with TfL a public transport accessibility level metric, which effectively divided the whole of Greater London into 100 by 100 metre squares and effectively used data through public transport timetabling to express the relative public transport accessibility of any given 100 by 100 metre square. Public transport access is completely different to connectivity insofar as public transport access only cares about how accessible public transport is to you rather than where it can actually get you. But what it basically done is by dividing it into 100 by 100 metre squares and expressing a value for each of those squares between 0 and 6b, 6b being the more accessible, 0 being the less accessible, you could understand at a click how accessible and consequently sustainable a location was, because what the mayor done with that metric, that output, that number, was embed it into the London plan and set regional policy for minimum density standards and maximum car parking standards based on how accessible a location was to public transport. That transformed London in terms of the amount of housing that was being delivered, but also where it was being delivered and at what density. Particularly in the suburbs, it drove up density significantly. Across London, it drove up density by between 78 and 144%. So that's an order of magnitude change. Connectivity Tool is the next evolutionary step because it talks about how the transport network can get you to where you want to go. This is P-Town. It's a heat map. It's squares. This is Woolwich Arsenal. That was the first slide I showed you, the higher density thing built around Crossrail. This is connectivity. So you can see that by appraising it in connectivity terms, you can see Woolwich Arsenal has a far greater sense of connectivity and its ability to accommodate different types of development. We've recently consulted on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, which isn't currently out to consultation. It closed. I really need to update this slide because I did put closed 10th of March, but anyway, doesn't matter. We're looking at the responses, so watch this space. But it does reference the tool, and the importance of connectivity is peppered throughout. There's a greater emphasis in the National Planning Policy Framework as transport as an enabler for growth. It links connectivity to density, but also specifically in policies TR1, which is about vision-led transport planning, and TR3, locating development in sustainable locations. It directly references the tool, as does the glossary. And we'll be very interested to see, for those of you who've made representations, what you've had to say. How do we think the tool can be used? Well, the list is as long as your arm, really. You can use it for whatever you want. But broadly speaking, it has been explicitly developed for transport and spatial planners for use in development of local transport plans, local plans, spatial options, underpinning local plans, site allocations assessments, master planning or area specific plans, spatial development strategies, local authorities working on infrastructure delivery plans, local authorities planning for health or education facilities or other bodies planning for those facilities, statutory consultees in deploying their function in local plan making, plan inspectors during local plan examination, connectivity as informing design codes, but also it can be used in decision taking, so analysing potential interventions needed to support the site, how statutory consultees, again, discharge their function, how you negotiate developer contributions, how you optioneer for new or enhanced transport routes and test some of that to inform business cases and later investment decisions, how you allocate funding for a scheme, but also assessing the suitability of the site. One of the key powers of the tool is its ability to contextually appraise and spatially appraise a site, all with the massive caveat that that has to be informed by local knowledge and professional judgment. So what do we think we're going to deliver in the short, medium and long term? Well, we think we're going to create systemic change as a result of doing this. It's free to use by everyone, everywhere in England and Wales, and Scotland, actually, you can access it there. But ultimately, we've done it to empower. We've done it to be used in a arsenal of tools that local authorities, developers, and others can deploy. And in doing so, we believe we've created better certainty in terms of earlier and clearer answers to what kind of development is appropriate, from sort of a single unambiguous metric, a single point of truth, that it will speed up decision and plan making. It will create better informed policy and decisions. It will certainly factor in evidence bases, and that there will be less duplication of effort. We've done that. We've done it so that you don't have to. We've got a national metric, so you can use it at any point for any purpose. So where are we now? Well, we're live. If you haven't used it all, please do. I love it. Well, I should do. I'm here talking about it. It'd be a bit perverse if I didn't. We've also got a Connectivity Lite app. So the main tool is accessible via a login, which anybody can request. It's not a problem. It's reserved for built environment professionals in the public and private sector, but you can request access to it and we will give it to you. But also, if you want just a sort of quick and dirty look at stuff, you can have a look at Connectivity Lite. It hasn't got any kind of login, and you can do an awful lot of the analytical functioning just on Connectivity Lite. As you know, and as I've said, we're integrating the tool with national planning policy and guidance. It's in the NPPF currently, but we're reviewing those responses and we'll issue a government response. But also we're expanding the propositional side of the tool. Equally, feedback is key. And we want to hear from you as end users as to what you want to see in the tool, how well it works for you, what functionality needs to be tweaked and improved. But just to be very clear, the tool is a fit for purpose planning tool that can be deployed at plan making, decision taking today. We're not looking at radically changing the tool in any way, shape or form. We're looking now to refine and reflect on feedback. And that's the end of that presentation, but I'll quickly do your demo just so that you've got a sense of what it does. So hopefully it hasn't logged me out, but I'm going to go into the Light tool first. I think the reason I'm going into the Light tool is that anybody who's used the main connectivity tool is that sometimes it can be a bit buggy and glitchy. That is partly because the architecture underpinning the tool at the present moment in time is slower than the architecture that we're currently putting in place for it. So in literally about a month, it will work in exactly the same way that Light does, because it will replicate that architecture. You'll find less bugs, less slowing in the system, less glitches as a result of changing that architecture. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to use light for some of the demonstration as to what it can do. So when you click on the connectivity tool, this is what you're effectively presented with: a map of England and Wales expressed as a heat map. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can search by coordinate, street name, postcodes. You can see it expresses things as hotspots and not spots. Unsurprisingly, hotspots tend to be located around sort of urban conurbations, not spots more in sort of rural locations. But as I've said previously, it's as applicable in rural contexts as it is in urban contexts. It's just how you express the relative connectivity of that space in relation to its own characteristics. So you'll have in rural areas hotspots and not spots. They will just be a little bit lower in score than those in more urban locations. I'm zooming into where because I just like the play on words. It's anywhere, just happens to be somewhere I know as well. So there you go. Also, give a bit of context, about 2 kilometers wide and tall, or long and short, I don't know. So it's a walkable town. It's a little market town. It's got a rail station. It's got some bus routes. It's quite rural in context. It's got some urban centres relatively close. You can get a train into London from it. As you can see, as I hover over different squares, scores change. Obviously, the further out of town I get to, when you get to places like Noah's Ark, who'd have thunk that was there? Or if you go up here, Cold Christmas, which is actually where I get my Christmas tree from. Is it ironic? Is it what? I can't even remember where it is. But anyway, is it determinist that I was going to get my Christmas tree from there? Anyway, doesn't matter. But you can see that effectively scores change. You can move around the map as much as you want. When you click on the square, it gives you that score. That's that single point of truth. This is overall connectivity. You can explore that score, and what this does is it gives you a report that you can download. And what it does is it gives you, obviously, the overall score. It gives you the geography of where it is, what local authority it's within, but also it breaks down the score by all of the different destinations and modes and gives you a score and a national distribution for that. You can also disaggregate that by destination type, etc., etc. And you can download all of this without any problem. You can also filter the map. So if, as I said before, all I care about is education destinations and kids getting to school by their little legs, I can click on education, click on walk-in, and as I say, the score changes, the map changes, it gives you that sense of relative connectivity by destination. So you can mix about with it as much as you can, depending on what you're planning for, depending on what you're appraising, and depending on what your interests are. As I said previously, you can do a local authority view. I'm not going to do that in where though. And the reason why I'm not doing it in where is because where doesn't give you the kind of example that I want to give. So I'm going to zoom in on Tower Hamlets. Now, obviously, London, most connected place in the country for obvious reasons. Actually, the most connected place is around Whitechapel. Gets a nice score of 100. There are obvious reasons for that. But incidentally, if you are Tower Hamlets as a council, seeing a sea of red, or red and white in this case, doesn't really help you that much because it kind of infers that everything's okay, or you put anything anywhere you want. So what you can do is you can select a local authority view, and what it will do in the first instance is it will just segregate your local authority boundary. But if you show local authority band, suddenly that redness becomes much more of a rainbow color. And what this is doing is it's showing you your relative not spots to your hotspots, even within this, largely high scoring area. So you can see the connectivity score in this location is 99, and that it's the most relatively high connectivity point in the whole of Tower Hamlets. But when you go to Poplar, which has got a nice pie mash up, I might add, you get a connectivity score of 94, which is still incredibly high, but you can see that actually it's local authority band rating D, because there are less destinations and less places you get to in that location. So that is the local authority view. Quickly, and this is where you get sometimes even glitches on the one that is much more architecturally streamlined. So I'll just let it catch up with me for a second. So I'll go back to where. Here we go, back in where. The other thing that the tool can do at the blink of an eye is tell you where all of the bus stops are in where, and if you hover on the bus stop, it'll tell you what bus stop it is. It will tell you where the rail stations are, tram, if there's ferries, etc., 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 tube, metro, light rail. You can also measure distances on the map. So you can measure distances from point A to point B. That's quite useful if a policy in the NPPF comes forward about reasonable walking distances. You can measure those distances using this measuring function. I've probably exhausted this version of the tool. So let's go to the main version tool, which, as it always does, has decided to log me out. So you might have to bear with. Talk amongst yourselves while I try and figure this out. Give us a sec. Right, there we go. Right, it's back. Is it back? It's back. Hopefully it's back. So what I've preloaded here is effectively, again, I've zoomed into where, and what I've asked it to do is now map all of the destinations for me. So again, from the point of view of for the purposes of this particular example, what I toggled on was education, but it's now crashed because I think it has actually logged me out. So it's going to mean that this demo is slightly shorter. I would ask, why don't you go to questions while I try and sort this little glitch out?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Don't worry, it's never worked with children, animals, and glitchy websites, isn't it? Is that right? Well, thank you. I mean, that's so comprehensive and concise at the same time. So thanks so much for that. That's really, really interesting. There's a job of work for Community Rail Network to be doing to start sort of scoping out and coming up with some ideas for and examples of how the tool might be useful for our members. So whilst Rob's having a look at logging back in, there's no questions currently posted on the question and answer tab. Did anyone have anything they'd like to ask or ask Rob to cover in the remaining minutes of this webinar? Pop your hand up for now. I can see Rebecca Cattrall from Devon and Cornwall's got your hand up. Rebecca.
Hiya, yeah. Yeah, so Rob, I'm based in Cornwall. We're the Devon and Cornwall Rail Partnership. Obviously, a lot of our area is very rural, apart from a couple of city hotspots. We have one of our rail routes down to Looe that was closed for 2 months this winter because of flooding. And obviously we were trying to build the case that we never want that to happen again, and that it has to still be a priority, even though it is a rural route. So what I'd be looking at using the tool for would be to try and look at what else is on options for people to get to education, leisure, health, all those kind of things, and build the case that actually the railway is crucial. Due to number of services, 7 days a week, all that kind of stuff. So what's the best way to do that?
Good question. So first thing first, and I'll quickly reshare. Now, whether this all works, different kettle of fish, but let's assume it does. So there's two things or two ways you can approach this. The first way you can approach it is the fact that there is an ability on the tool to view the routes that contribute most to your score, right? So this takes a little bit of time to calculate, but I'll zoom in on where again, assuming it sort of catches up with me at a rate of knots that I want it to. I can go to understand the score. I can select what time of day I want it to show the routes that contribute most to my score, and I can show segments on the map. What this will do when it loads, if it loads, is it will show you a little bit. Wait a second, let me just quickly go to this. If you can see just behind this pop-up where it says, please stay signed in, you can see these are the key routes that contribute most to your connectivity score. This route here is a rail route that goes into Liverpool Street. The tool will be able to tell you how much of your connectivity score is dependent on that rail route. If that rail route therefore is severed, you can make an argument that actually that contributes significantly to your score, ergo it needs to be protected, preserved, enhanced. Equally, one of the things about this particular square here is that this is a real key walking route to get you to most of your transport interchanges, not least the railway station, but also your bus services. If you know that this contributes, I think it's about 83% to this 75 score, but that route is called Murder Alley, and there's a load of snakes and knives and broken glass and asbestos down it. It doesn't mean that that isn't the route that contributes most of the score. It means that that's the route that needs the most enhancement to ensure that it's realised for the most of it, for your score. So it's about being able to interrogate the data in a way that's useful to the end user. Equally, one of the things that we are looking at moving forward in terms of functionality, and one of the things that users have sort of mentioned to us is, and this is much more in a bus context, but I see it as applicable to your context as well, Rebecca, is how, in a bus context, we know that in rural locations, buses struggle, and actually they get cancelled more than they do anything else sort of thing. So how can we get the tool to deselect bus routes and then recalculate the score based on that? Broadly speaking, if we could develop that functionality, you'd be able to do the same in terms of rail, or you'd be able to tweak the timetable accordingly. Again, the net result showing what the value of that route is relative to the connectivity score. So we're looking at how we can potentially develop that moving forward.
Thanks. And that's all available in the light, or would that be the? That's
in the main.
That's
but you can get access to the main. It's not a problem.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. That's great. Thank you.
Oh, here we go. Look, I've done Hertford. It's a 73. So what you can do is you can zoom in, and can you see how the scores change as I'm sort of hovering over it? You know, you can also see a route list, which effectively tells you what routes contribute the most. There's a national rail route, contributes much more than the bus route. And you can print that out in a report as well. That tells you what its contribution is. Again, it's just very useful in sort of business case terms.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you.
Rob, could I just ask an extension to that question? And you've kind of half answered it, I think, already, but just for clarity. So if, for example, a community rail member would like to open a conversation with the train operating company regards changing timetable frequency, can this tool tinker around with that to give a proposition of what the impact of that would be as it currently stands, or is that your aspiration?
At the minute, no. There is a sort of workaround that you can use, which is you could plan a new rail route, give the timetable information and see what the uplift is for that. But that could be an element of double counting. I think what we are trying to do is see what is the art of the possible in being able to tinker around with things like timetables and stuff to see the relative impact of that. That's quite a sophisticated leap, because what you're trying to then do is sort of filter the data in a way and sort of manipulate the data in a way that currently it doesn't do. But it doesn't mean that it's not on our to-do list.
Okay. Great, because that would be a really exciting proposition, I think, from our point of view. So, thank you. Did you have got a little bit more time? Did you want to have a quick run through the full version if it's working now?
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to assume, yeah, so look, I can show all my destinations. Again, I can measure these destinations. If I click on a square and then click on the individual little mortarboard hat, it'll tell me what school it is, what type of entry it is. So there's a primary school, here's a primary school, here's another primary school, there's a secondary school, and you can measure distances to that as well. Again, you can show key routes and all of that sort of jazz. One thing that I did want to show you briefly is you can that's the other thing. I'm not going to show you on this because I haven't got a GeoJSON file to hand, but you can upload sites. So if you've got multiple sites in your area, you can upload all of those sites and then appraise, assess, and print reports for the connectivity of those sites, and it'll give you things like averages of connectivity across the site. I'll show you access points, etc., etc., etc. One thing I did want to show you is the propositional function. So I'm just going to go back to where, and I'm going to talk about. I'm going to do a sort of Blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier because it takes quite a long time to do. But what you can do is plot a new route. In plotting a new route, do a bus station, for example, you can either fix the bus to existing bus stops, or you can create new stops, and you can save that, tweak that, ad infinitum effectively. But because that takes a bit of time and you have to put in timetable information, it will generate a virtual timetable for you, frequency of service and all of this sort of stuff. I've done a little bit of here's one I made earlier. So obviously the government wants to deliver new towns up and down the country. And I've decided, the government has decided that they want to put a new town in Noah's Ark. So what I've done, Noah's Ark currently has quite a low connectivity rating, 38, obviously, because it's kind of not in the middle of anywhere, but it has a bus route that sort of services it across this route here. So what I've said is, right, well, what would make Noah's Ark a little bit more sustainable in transport terms? Well, bus seems to be the predominant way of getting from A to B. Equally, this walking distance is about 2K, so it might not be something that someone's necessarily going to walk down, nor might that route have even a pavement. So what I've done is I've done 2 bus routes. The buses go into Hertford, which is the nearest sort of employment retail centre in the locality. But I've also done one that sort of filters through Harlow to Bishop Stortford, which are big employment generators. As I say, I've planned for the timetable on that. And then what I've done is I've drawn an impact area. And what I can now see is what the uplift has been as a result of 2 new bus routes into the Noah's Ark new town. So you can see it's actually gone up quite a lot by those 2 bus routes. One thing just to mention while I've got a captive audience, which is quite nice, is one of the challenges we get back from people is, oh, it doesn't account for rural connectivity because all of the connectivity is in urban locations. So that's only applicable in urban locations. That's factually incorrect. It's just you're going to get lower relative scores. So what we're doing currently with colleagues is we're going to update the guidance to show local authorities, developers, and whomever else how to interpret the scores for rural locations as much as urban. So what we've done is we've divided the whole of the country into a rural urban classification. There's six classifications, and within each of those classifications we've identified the scores that indicate low connectivity versus high. So the relative connectivity of, say, this particular Noah's Ark new town will be different to that of, say, Tower Hamlets or even Hertford. So it's important just to note that. The other little route that I've decided to plan just for whimsy, and on the off chance that the Chancellor some point in the future is my busy friend, is I've planned for a new bus route, but I've also planned for a new high-speed rail route from Noah's Ark straight into Liverpool Street, where loads of stuff is, and then I've drawn an impact area from a new town, suddenly you've got cray levels of improved connectivity. Obviously, I don't think they're going to do that, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't show what you can do with the propositional function that is useful in the building of outline business cases that can inform those types of decisions, can be used in real world applications when you're talking about planned applications and securing developer contributions, but how we plan for our future investment decisions in things like local transport plans and how you can build that case for change. And I think, oh, and the other thing you can do is you can put aerial photos over, which is nice. We need to refine that a little bit more so you can overlay the grid as well and probably get a little bit greater resolution. But anyway, I've wittered. I apologise.
Rob, that's fantastic, Ken. Thank you. I'm going to open the floor to questions again at the moment. But as I said, I think you've been so comprehensive, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not many. One question from me. I know we have members of Scotland. Some have joined us today, but may watch this recording. You mentioned it's specifically for England and Wales, but you said that there is access in Scotland. But when you had that overview map, it didn't go into Scotland when it filled the data. So just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, so it doesn't cover Scotland, but people from Scotland can access it. Certainly they can access Connectivity Lite. They can request access for the full connectivity tool. In terms of why Scotland's not included, we've been talking to the Scottish Government about how we can include it. One of the biggest sticking points is the public right to roam, which makes it more difficult to sort of do things like, walk-in connectivity and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's impossible. So we're continuing to talk to them. We're also talking to Northern Ireland about how we can extend the tool to those geographies as well. But as I say, anyone can access the tool. If they want access to the main tool, they can do that by request. You just send us an email to the email address connectivity@dft.gov.uk, and we process that request in 24 hours often. But the Connectivity Lite tool, mum can access that. I mean, she don't, but she could if she wanted to be proud of her son. Ever. No, I'm only mucking. Oh my God, it all got Sally Jesse Raphael all of a sudden.
Fantastic, Rob. Thank you. So yes, opportunity for any final questions. Again, none have been posted so far. So just if you do have any questions, pop your hand up. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to think about that. Rob, I think you can probably expect a flurry of requests for access over the coming days. And as I've said previously, I think there's a piece of work that Community Rail Network can be doing to just sort of sketching out how we think it specifically might relate to Community Rail as well. I can't see any questions. I'll be honest. If I have missed it, just take yourself off mute and raise your voice. And if not, then I shall probably finish by saying, Rob, that's fantastic. Thank you so much again for making yourself available. Ben, you've got your hand up, I can see. Go for it.
Gary, hello, Gary. Thank you very much for that presentation. I was going to ask you, could I have a copy of the slides, please?
Oh, yeah, of course you can.
Rob,
Thank
brilliant.
you.
Rob, yeah, if you send them to me, I can make them available on request. So if you want access to the slides, give Rob 48 hours to get them to me, and I can forward them on if that's okay with you, Rob. Great.
Cheers, Gary. Thank you, Rob.
Lovely. Okay, well, so just wrap things up. Once again, just say thank you so much for Rob for providing that demonstration. Really, really interesting. And also thank you to the member who raised the request for information about the connectivity tool, which I'm glad we were able to arrange. So much appreciated for everyone's support. My intention is to send out a quick, and I say very quick, survey in the next couple of days, just to get your responses about how you found the webinar. And I'm also going to pop in there a request, because it'd be really interesting for us to get back in touch with in 6 months or so, just to find out if you've managed to use it within your practice. So keep an eye out for that if you could, and I really would appreciate if you were able to respond, just to help us to report and monitor the impact of our work. And similarly, yeah, do have a look at the Community Rail Network website for future events, training and networking opportunities. places, integrated sustainable transport discussion group, open to members. We've got a meeting coming up at the end of May. We're going to have a presentation from Little Switzerland in the Peak District project. We're going to have a little look at the Integrated National Transport Strategy, which is not called NITS anymore. We'll have a look at that and the impact on community rail of that and the opportunities that might present. And also, for some of you may be aware, there is a members-only webinar from the British Transport Police next week, looking at designing safer places at stations. So if you're interested in that, have a look at our website and you can log in. But as I said, that is for members only, that particular event. Steve, I can see you've raised your hand. We've got a couple of minutes, so
yeah,
feel free to ask.
Just a quick, I mean, Rob, that was really comprehensive. You covered a heck of a lot of detail. I just want to ask about how you keep it updated with all the information that you've got available as things change.
Good question. And simple answer. What we're doing is we're going to be updating the data every year. You will then be able to cross compare years, year on year on year. The map will change, the score will change, and you'll be able to print a report on that. We don't update it any more regularly than that for one simple purpose, which is the fact that if it's going to be used in plan making and decision taking, you can't have a score that's ever changing. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to make a decision. But it will be updated annually, and you'll be able to compare year on year and actually use it for example, if you've developed a local transport plan and you've planned for some interventions that you know have been delivered. So going back to, say, Rebecca's example, say they built a monorail over the railway that came forward in a local transport plan, you could appraise the impact of that in real terms after the annual update of the data.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, well, yeah, finally, thanks again. Many of you would have found out about this event through the Community Rail fortnightly newsletter. If you haven't signed up, make sure you do. You can do that on the Community Rail website. And yeah, to finish once again, thanks so much, Rob. Thanks for everyone for attending today. And hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Rob.